All right. I've skipped ahead a few pages. There was some stuff that was kind of unnecessary and a bit distracting. So we're jumping right into adapting argumentation to writing. And these are their sort of tips and tricks. Imagine your reader as an absent listener. A primary difference between spoken and written arguments is that speakers and writers have a very different relationship with their audience or audiences. For example, committee members are all in direct contact with each other and hence can gauge with some precision when their points are being understood, accepted, or rejected by other members. Nods of agreement will keep a speaker moving ahead quickly, whereas a frown will slow her down, even cause the speaker to back up, making the point in a new way, going into more detail. But writers cannot see their readers' nods and frowns. They need to role play the reader, anticipating where general agreement will keep the argument moving ahead, where potential confusion calls for clarification, and where potential disagreement calls for a summary of opposing views and either concession or refutation in response to the imagined frown. So we're imagining the reader, whoever we're writing for, imagine them in the room with you, responding to the things you're saying, and try to imagine where they would need you to clarify and where they would be with you. Respect your audience's humanity. Good writers have a number of choices on how they want to treat their audience. Usually, however, it is best to treat your audience with the kind of respect shown to each other by members of the technology board. That's an example from one of the pages before that we skipped. Consider again the difference between the board members and the crank. Oh man, you guys are relying on the thing I skipped. Okay, so the board members are people who are arguing with each other, not fighting, mind you, but arguing over a point. And the crank is somebody who just wants to disrupt and argue for argument's sake and not actually get anywhere. Whereas the board members addressed each other respectfully, cranks distance themselves from anyone with different views by adopting an insulting tone. This insulting tone can often backfire. Our reading of their words may become hypercritical, unforgiving, and perversely counter to their intentions. Long ago, the ancient rhetoricians recognized the importance of ethos in argument. That is, the hearer's faith that the speaker is a good and trustworthy person. Ethos, if you're wondering, is where we get the word ethics and ethical treatment of one another. A cranky tone can break down ethos, just as respect tends to beget respect, so crankiness tends to beget crankiness. Unless writers appear to be open to other views, they cannot expect other people to be open to their own. So respect your audience's humanity. We're like, recognize that the person reading it is also a human, and is constructed of a bunch of different perspectives that are probably different from your own. Okay, respect your audience's ideas. Not only do writers need to treat their audience courteously, they also need to respect their audience's ideas. This respect is evidenced in two ways: an openness towards opposing views during the writing process, and a fair acknowledgement of opposing views in the finished product. During the writing process, writers seek clarity for themselves. In order to achieve this clarity, writers need to practice doubting their own ideas, to try seeing their position from differing perspectives. As we saw in the example of the technology board, such confrontation with opposing views can bring out the complexity of an issue. Considering contrary ideas will cause us either to create arguments countering the opposition or to concede key points, thereby demonstrating the kind of openness to opposing views that characterizes arguers seeking clarity. Argument becomes a cooperative search for the best reasons among people with differing views, as opposed to a pro-con debate between unyielding opponents. So remember, we're saying that the point of argument is to seek clarification, not to beat the other person down. Within the finished product itself, a writer will usually summarize one or more differing views, taking care to recreate differing arguments fairly and charitably. In addition, writers will anticipate places in the argument where opponents are apt to raise objections and will move to acknowledge and counter these objections at that point. Whereas the writer of crank letters seems to carry a one-sided conversation with other believers, the skilled arguer is mentally carrying on a dialogue with doubters. So we're talking about sentences like, opponents of my point might say, or if you don't know what I mean by this, let me clarify. Sentences like that, where you're imagining the other person coming at you in good faith and seeking to understand what you're saying, and you're just trying your best to make your point. Conclusion. Our goal in this text is to help you learn skills of argumentation. If you choose, you can use these skills, like Callicles, to argue any side of any issue, and yet we hope you won't. We hope that, like Socrates, you will use argument for clarification, and that you will consequently find yourself, on at least some occasions, changing your position on an issue while writing a rough draft, a sure sign that the process of arguing has been a process of clarification. We believe that the skills of reasons and inquiry developed through the writing of arguments can help you get a clearer sense of who you are. If our culture sets you adrift in pluralism, argument can help you take a stand, to say, these things I believe. In this text, we will not pretend to tell you what position to take on any given issue, but as responsible beings, you will often need to take a stand, to define yourself, to say, here are the reasons that choice A is better than choice B, not just for me, but for you also. If this text helps you base your commitments on reasonable grounds, then it will be successful. Okay, so that's the end of this reading, and I will post the assignment as a separate Google Doc, just like always, and I'll see you there.